Good morning, everyone. It is our pleasure to present to you our paper on gold exploration, mining, and rural development. Unfortunately, Dr. Prabhakar couldn't join us here physically, but he has joined us online. The true origin of gold formation predates the formation of Earth itself. There is considerable amount of energy that is required to make gold, which even the largest object in our solar system, that is the sun, can't produce. While the process of nuclear fission within the sun does make many elements, it still doesn't have what it takes to synthesize the beautiful yellow metal that we all know, love, and basically make a living out of. The amount of energy required to synthesize each atom of gold can only be achieved by explosion or collision of stars. Research conducted by the Natural Environment Research Council in 2011 suggests that during the process of Earth's formation, the debris from dead stars along with other heavy metals sank towards the planet's core. However, around 4 billion years ago, the bombardment of Earth by asteroids stirred the deeper layers of the planet and forced some gold into the mantle. In the words of researchers who tested this theory by examining the isotopic composition of rock samples from Greenland, the occurrence of gold on our planet is a lucky coincidence. The contribution of this paper lies in bringing together the geophysical, sociological, and economic aspects of gold mining and exploration in India. It endorses the idea that mining activities are an incredible source of income generation and employment, while also proving to be an opportunity for rural development. This is in line with Enrico Moretti's local multipliers, wherein he posits that every time a local economy generates a new job by attracting a new business, additional jobs might be created as a result of the increased demand for local goods and services. By reviewing the geology of gold exploration, we hope to highlight the urgency and the need for adapting sophisticated technology, equipment, and data-driven exploration. While the idea behind bringing together the various policy documents into a single paper is to create a one-stop solution for any regulations-related inquiry, thereby streamlining the process and making it accessible to all stakeholders. And finally, the process of carrying out a deep field study of the potential areas will facilitate a nuanced understanding of the endowments and expectations of the residents, scope for infrastructure development, effectiveness and penetration of existing development policies, identification of target areas, and periodic evaluation of public policy. A similar approach is already underway in the coal industry, where the government of India is in conversation with the World Bank, wherein a more sustainable approach to coal mining operations from the perspective of geospatial data-driven exploration, efficient technology, minimal environmental costs, as well as socio-economic costs in the form of relocation, infrastructure development, and welfare is being proposed. With its deep focus on understanding the multidimensionality of mining operations, this study has the potential to work as a handbook of reference for investors, policy makers, as well as academics interested in the study of gold mining and exploration in India. For the purpose of the discussion paper, our primary focus would be on reviewing and understanding the policies for development, demystifying the social mechanisms and interactions between the various stakeholders, identifying the gaps in policy, and ultimately allowing us to start thinking and discussing about a more multidisciplinary approach to gold mining operations. The study is planned to be carried out in 15 identified gold mines across India, starting with the Kolar gold fields in Karnataka. John Taylor and Sons Limited starting mining operations in KGF in the year 1880. As the gold mines grew, labor requirements were met from the neighboring districts of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. At its peak, KGF was home to almost 30,000 workers and their families. While there is evidence to suggest that the socio-economic composition of workers and British officers was designed in a way that resulted in conflict and subsequent inequality, it also resulted in infrastructure development in and around the mining areas in the form of established schools, hospitals, and electricity. Unfortunately, KGF was shut down by the Government of India in February 2001 for environmental and economic reasons, and with that went jobs that had sustained families for generations. At present, 260,000 people are living there, under conditions of extreme deprivation and poverty, who must travel 4 hours every day to the city of Bengaluru for work. There is no proper electricity or water supply as a result of the neglect of the local municipal corporation. Additionally, pensions as low as 650 rupees persist, which make it extremely difficult for the retired mine workers to sustain themselves. KGF stands tall as the epitome of failed sustainable development planning in India. Therefore, there's clearly a need to start thinking about a more organic approach to mining operations, and in such a way that socio-economic development trickles down generations instead of resentment. Despite its incredible potential, the sector remains underutilized. In a country with over 17% of the land area having potential mining resources, only 0.25% is currently being exploited. As of 2021, the mining sector's contribution to GDP stands at barely 1.75%. From a development perspective, the gold mining industry in itself, a metaphorical gold mine of opportunities. In addition to bringing in direct and indirect employment opportunities for the regional economy, gold mining attracts FDI, foreign exchange, and tax revenues. Since mining operations are generally conducted in remote locations, there is ensuing investment in infrastructure and utilities in the form of road, water, electricity supply, ultimately leading to local economic development. To give you an idea about the lost opportunities for complementary development, according to the study conducted by the Forum for Integrated Development and Research in 2020, discontinuation of mining operations had led to a fall in household incomes by more than half. While 70% of the respondents attributed mining to have been the major source of employment, 65% of the respondents expressed that the dilapidating livelihoods as a result of job losses, further spiraling into indebtedness, bankruptcy, violence, and general mental instability. The 5 states surveyed, where mining accounts for over 12% of the state's GDP, could have been the flag bearers of the vision of a $5 trillion Indian economy, in addition to playing a crucial role in employment generation. The Federation of Indian Mineral Industries had stated that the combined job losses from the upshot of mining bans in just Karnataka and Goa, which was in 2011, 2018 respectively, is estimated to be at 1.28 million. These numbers would tell us another story if we were to invert the context from shutting down operations to instead starting mining operations in an identified region. But how would that story look like? Italian-born American economist Enrico Moretti in 2011 came up with the idea of a local job multiplier in the regional economy, which is essentially how employment can be potentially generated as a result of new economic activity being undertaken in a particular local setting. In this context, if we were to consider mining operations as setting up of a new industry in the local economy, then Moretti theorizes that the positive effects on employment generation from an exogenous shock, which in this case is setting up of mining operations, is somewhat offset by general equilibrium effects induced by changes in local wages and prices of local services. And what exactly does he mean by that? To put it simply, in his conceptual framework, each city is a competitive economy that utilizes labor for the production of two goods: nationally traded goods whose price is exogenously set, and non-traded goods whose price is set locally. Labor is assumed to be free to move across these both sectors. When mining operation is set up in the city, in the form of a shock to the tradable sector, there will be an increase in the demand for labor, which will have a direct impact on employment in the mining industry, as well as the rest of the tradable and non-tradable sector. As the wages of all workers in the city increase, the cost of local commodities also increases. Moretti uses housing, but it is also possible to extend it to all other commodities in the consumption basket, such as food, shelter, clothing, etc. In other words, as the city's budget constraint increases, there will be an increase in the demand for non-tradable goods, leading to an increase in other industries such as schools, hospitals, restaurants, real estate, cleaning services, etc. The magnitude of the local multiplier for the non-tradable sector depends on 4 factors. Consumer preferences in technology, as in more labor-intensive technology would generate a larger multiplier. Nature of jobs in the tradable sector, where skilled jobs would have a higher multiplier as compared to unskilled jobs. The degree of elasticity of the local labor supply and supply of local commodities. In purely theoretical terms, the city-wise increase in labor costs as a result of higher wages leads to a partial decline in the demand for local services. This partially undoes the effect of the increase in demand for local commodities. The shock to the mining sector and the tradable sector will also affect employment in other tradable industries. However, the direction of this effect is a priori unclear and is governed by 3 factors. Firstly, city-wise increase in labor costs could negatively impact employment in other industries of the tradable sector. as their competitiveness lowers. Since the price of tradable goods is exogenously set in the national market and therefore cannot adjust to local economic shocks, it is possible that some of the production might be shifted to neighboring cities. Secondly, the increase in the production of mining could lead to an increase in demand for intermediate goods and services, which are again subject to the integrity of the local supply chain. Undeniably, it would be advantageous to piggyback on economic agglomeration at this stage, which brings us to the third factor. If agglomeration is significant, the growth in production of mining will contribute to local economic agglomeration. Moretti goes on to provide further empirical evidence where he finds that every additional job in the tradable sector in a given city, 1.6 jobs are created in the non-tradable sector in the same city. This impact is significantly larger for skill jobs, where one additional skill job in the tradable sector generates 2.5 jobs in local goods and services. This framework resonates with available evidence of the generation of employment as a result of mining operations. According to a report by the WGC member companies contributed $3.7 billion to the GDP of the countries where they were operating. This includes taxes, salaries, and payments to suppliers, and employed as many as 200,000 workers collectively. Specifically in 2020, WGC member companies directly paid $8.7 billion in employee wages and $7.6 billion in tax payments across 38 countries, with an additional contribution of 438 million to communities and indigenous people. However, merely generating employment is not enough. A crucial aspect of responsible gold mining practices is understanding the impact of such mining on local communities before and after the life of the mine. The New Afton gold mining project in Canada, which started its operations in 2012, under a mutually beneficial New Afton participation agreement, ensures business, employment, training, and educational opportunities for the indigenous First Nations. In the Maricunga and La Cuipa mines in Chile, which is considered as one of the driest places on the planet, the Kinross Gold Corporation has undertaken extensive studies to better understand the hydrological cycle and implemented mechanisms to improve water efficiency. Another unique turn of events took place in Finland, where the mine rescue teams volunteers as members of the local fire department. There are several other examples where responsible gold mining has led to improvement in the local economy with indirect effects on the global economy, such as social infrastructure development by Goldcorp's Somalian mine in Guatemala, banking facilities set up by the gold companies in Papua New Guinea, national healthcare schemes provided by Golden Star Resources in Ghana, the on-site training center at Kinross's Kupol mining operations in Russia, etc. Keeping in mind the high socio-economic and environmental costs of gold mining, the Government of India has consistently evolved institutions and regulatory frameworks to ensure efficient and sustainable administration of existing mining operations and environmental laws. The first National Mineral Policy recognized the need for private investment expenditure in the form of FDI, which helped in bringing in advanced technology for improving productivity and achieving economies of scale. The 2008 revision of the National Mineral Policy emphasized the implementation of sustainable practices in mining. Additionally, to promote transparency in governance procedures relating to auctioning and renewal of mining activities, the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Act in 2015 was instituted with the provision for the creation of a district mineral foundation. Under this act, the mine leaseholder must contribute anywhere between 10 to 30% of the royalty amount to the DMF, which will then be invested in socio-economic and environmental development in and around mining areas. As of 2020, the amount allocated under DMFs of various states is shown in the table, with Odisha leading the way, followed by Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Total collections stand at 45,000 crores with almost 2 lakh sanctioned projects. At this stage, we know pretty much everything we need to know about gold mining and policies revolving around it. However, there also exists a multitude of central and state-sponsored schemes for development. Upon reviewing these policies and schemes at the state level, we observed that we could clearly identify target areas for each state, and that it is possible to cluster these policies under 8 major sectors, as is currently being done by the Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana: personal, human, social, economic development, environmental development, basic amenities and services, social security, and finally good governance. But why do we even need to talk about policies for development? The need for thinking about sustainable development arises as the result of volatilities observed in Moretti's local economy. Given that the price of producing output in the mining industry is exogenously fixed it would be reasonable to say that the wages paid to workers in these mines would likely suffer from the lack of market adjustment, even if the prices of consumption goods required for sustenance available in the local economy would increase. This happens when different economic agents, which in this case includes mine workers, non-mine workers, industrialists, etc., act in self-interest, leading to a lack of social trust and cooperation, further spiraling into an unbalanced distribution of social capital. In social sciences, we call this phenomena the tragedy of the commons, wherein the fabric of economic activity and sustainable governance is endangered by the overpowering influence of just a few agents. It is possible to label the naturally occurring limited resource for mining, the common pool of workers constituting the labor supply, as well as local consumption goods and services required for sustenance, as interdependent commons, not necessarily coordinating on economic and social decisions. Economist Elinor Ostrom, the pioneer of the subject of commons, explains that successful and sustainable governance of the commons is subject to the characteristics of the resource, attributes of the commoners, as well as legal regulations in place. And as these interactions increase, requirements for management demand diversification in their approach to governance. At this stage, it is crucial to recognize the significant role of institutions for sustainable economic development. Institutions possess the power to lower transaction costs of searching, information, decisions, and bargaining by establishing common legal frameworks and encouraging trust in the legal system. Therefore, there is a need for the reformation of economic institutions which arise as an outcome of collective choices in political processes. However, what remains to be seen is the actual impact of economic institutions in assessing and implementing policies for development. Almost all efforts made at intervening in the natural processes of convergence and divergence of distribution of social capital are diagnostic, in the sense that affirmative action is implemented on the basis of identification of existing characteristics of the economy. Such an approach to development policy is riddled with high costs of identification and misidentification, delayed response, bureaucracy, and inefficient execution. Instead, we aim to propose a prognostic approach to mining as an instrument for rural development. The idea behind emphasizing on such an approach lies in its structural ability to identify opportunities and problem areas even before mining operations are underway, and simultaneously enable monitoring and measurement of said development policy. Scientific evaluation of policy requires the use of analytical frameworks that can disaggregate the complex interactions between agents and the economic environment. This is precisely where the scope of sustainable development framework under the PMKKY guidelines weakens. Moreover, the summary of the central and state-sponsored schemes highlights the ambiguous nature of their continuity with SDF guidelines, making it challenging to develop a scientific tool of measurement to appropriately determine their impact. Therefore, there is a need to develop a holistic analytical framework with the ability to monitor and evaluate the efficiency of development policy on an a priori basis. To this effect, the sustainable development narrative in social sciences has extensively relied on the sustainable livelihood framework as an applied analytical tool for the formulation of pro-poor development policies in developing nations. By capturing the complexities of household livelihoods into 5 distinct capitals, namely skills, knowledge, and health under human capital, networks and resources under social capital, natural resources under natural capital, infrastructure and equipment under physical capital, savings and inflow of money under financial capital, it is possible to assess the degree of vulnerability of households to local and national shocks. The framework also allows for interactions between the various forms of capital by defining them according to the individual's capability to use these capitals. By shifting perspective to conducting a prognostic analysis by organizing a deep field study of the potential mining operation sites, it would be possible to design a very specific approach to mining operations. The present sustainable development framework for mining operations, while flexible and open-ended, is limited in its ability to coexist and cooperate with other state and centrally sponsored schemes. It is only by reaching a point of convergence between the two, which is precisely where the sustainable livelihood framework comes in handy, that efficient utilization, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation can take place. Policy action can then be catered to each identified environment for potential development activity by simply looking at the gaps between the household capitals and accessibility of non-traded goods. Once this foundation is laid, and as the local economy progresses through the life of the mining operation, policies can be amended based on Ostrom's principle of governance of the commons. At the same time, since the SLF can help identify endowments, it will enable policymakers to monitor the trajectory of economic mobility and sustainable development in and around mining areas. The overtly simplistic analytical framework proposed in the previous section is limited in its ability to quantify the dynamics of interactions between the various agents. Specifically, the challenge lies in the identification and measurement of capitals possessed as well as demanded by the agents within the limitations of the environment. This is because agents take decisions not only based on individual characteristics, but also on group characteristics. In the Indian context, these groups can result from economic, social, or even cultural shared histories of the agents. Future potential studies from the perspective of human geography have greater potential to estimate returns on employment for agents involved in mining operations. A step in that direction is to do an observational deep study of the local environment around mining operation sites in order to better understand the interdependent strategic interactions that develop in these areas. I just want to end with a single incident that happened. So yesterday, while me and the other junior researchers from IGPC were helping distributing the welcome kits and the badges for all of us, a gentleman asked us what is in the bag, and we did not know. So I thought to myself, okay, maybe it is not my job, but then I thought, okay, maybe, it is my job after all to know about things that I'm doing. So on this note, I invite Dr. Prabhakar and everyone on the floor to have an open discussion, and so that we can all look inside the bag and see what's in there. Thank you.
So, Abhishek, Dr. Prabhakar, if you look at Moretti's framework, right, and if you apply it to any new upcoming mine location where a mine might be coming up, let's say in Andhra Pradesh, any predictions on the amount of employment generation, value creation for a new site apart from existing sites, or is there some data that tells us this was the approximate level of incremental employment generation and value creation at older sites where we already have the data and there is some analysis?
If we were to apply Moretti's framework to estimate how many jobs would be created, one way to do that would be to use data from the periodic labor force survey and just apply the same analytical framework. And I mean, it would be really hard for me to tell you a number at this point, because each mining operation would have a very unique approach applied to them. I mean, because the local economy around wherever we set up a mine would be very different. And so commenting on a single number would not be possible at this stage.
An impact assessment study normally at the end of the whole process asks for this was the increment in labor participation, this was the increment in local GDP, for example, this was the increment in number of housing units, this was the increment in number of new people who moved into this location, right? So if I'm doing something for, I'm examining the impact of the activities of BCCI, for example, on what is happening in the Silchar district in Assam, right? So the fact that BCCI has got talent scouts looking for people, that they have helped in the construction of a local stadium, all of that is actually going to be indicative of the creation of local value, right? So I'm just wondering how Moretti's model allows us to build on all of these apart from the labor side. Is there something additional that you would want to consider beyond Moretti's model?
Definitely Moretti's model has his own limitations, and there are certain assumptions. I mean, he's assuming that labor is completely free to move across sectors, but that is not always something that we observe.
It's a good model. Don't get me wrong. It's a good model, and it gives a fairly robust, I think, and that assumption is a reasonable assumption. It gives a fairly robust number on the labor. I'm just saying that there may be additional elements which it does not capture. What might be those additional elements in the mining context? And maybe the answer to that is labor is the principal element, and if we are capturing that, we have a sense of what is the value add, right? So I'm asking you, what is the answer?
So I think another way we could probably address this is doing a geospatial analysis to understand exactly how and where people are located around the mining areas. And I mean, so a very good indicator of how well, how comfortable a household is living is looking at their rooftops and the construction of their rooftops. So if it's a pakka ghar, as we usually classify pakka and kacha ghars in development economics, if it's a pakka ghar, then chances are that, and if majority of the houses around the mining areas are pakka ghars, then we can reasonably say that, okay, things are going well. But if that's not the case, then we need to really dig deeper and find out why exactly that's happening. So that's, I mean.
Sir, I want to add a point here, sir. Hello.
Dr. Prabhakar, go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Namaste. Sir, working like Hatti Gold Mine now, which is now has got a labors of about 4,000 labors, where mining, metallurgy, and infrastructure work is there, sir. Now we have got so many explored areas. They will not be as big as a Hatti Gold Mine, sir. They will be a small satellite mines. Some will be working in a underground mining. Some will be open cast mining, sir. By this one, some will be like a satellite mines to the existing mine. Some will be in a group of the mines, sir. It's like that. Our analysis and our studies shows that each mine will be generating about a direct employment of about 500 people, sir. 500 people, workers on each small mine, direct employees, sir. Indirectly, it will be about another 600, 700 people will be there, sir. By this one, there will be a production from each mine, from what we are producing about from 4,000 people is about a 1.6 tons, sir. By this one, definitely we are going to enhance the gold production. This is thing. And regarding the infrastructure facilities like housing and all those things, sir, sometimes these will be the satellite mines, where the group housing will be constructed in the centralized places with a well infrastructure, and they will be shifted from that area to the mining operating area, sir. Because where in the core and buffer zone area, we cannot construct the full-fledged good infrastructure because of the blasting of the area, blasting zone and vibration disturbance will be there. Because we have to carry out a safe, sustainable, eco-friendly mining. Over, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhakar.
A paper presentation on HRM practices, working conditions and labor engagement in the Indian gold manufacturing sector. It is being presented by Professor Biju Varkkey. Professor Varkkey obtained his Masters in Human Resource Management from the Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala, and Fellow in Management title from NIBM, Pune. His professional experiences span industries, consulting, and leading management schools, having taught at IIM Lucknow and MDI Gurgaon. Currently, he is the faculty member at IIM Ahmedabad with the Human Resource Management area, where he teaches in the graduate, executive development, and doctoral programs. Joining him will be Professor Jatinder K Jha from XLRI. Professor Jha has been working as assistant professor at XLRI Xavier School of Management, Jamshedpur, from May 2017. His areas of research are designing sustainable HRM systems, human resource practice and challenges in diamond industry, gems and jewelry industry, banking industry, and family businesses, among various others. Sir.
So this study is about what are the various labor practices, labor conditions, and the whole study that we have conducted is the largest study which has been funded by IGPC, and it's a joint project between two institutes, IIM Ahmedabad and XLRI. So I am from XLRI. Professor Biju Varkkey is from IIM Ahmedabad, who is the primary invigilator in this particular project. So for this presentation, we have just taken the small part of it, which is the evidence from labor practices in informal sector. So the framework that we have used to understand the labor issues in this industry is the decent work. The question is why decent work framework is important to understand the labor condition in this particular industries. Because since the inception of International Labour Organization, where India is the founding signatory, so they are emphasizing on what are the various parameters based on which work should be created. So there are 6 dimensions based on which decent work operates. One is the opportunities for work for both men and women. Second is the work condition for freedom. Freedom means freedom from bonded labor, child labor, freedom to join workers association. The third is the productive work. So what does it mean? Productive work means work providing sustainable livelihood to the workers and their families. So it's not just about providing the employment opportunity to the employees. It's also about whether it's a sustainable. Is it providing the sustainable livelihood to the employees or not? The last one is social security and dignity at work. Social security is basically related to the financial security in case of illness, unemployment, or any contingency which a worker is required. The last one is dignity at work. So it is more or less related to the kind of fair treatment they are getting at workplace, kind of work allocation is done to them. Is there any kind of discrimination at workplace which is happening in the any industry? So if we see in the sum, decent work refers to various types of security which has been provided to the employees in various sectors, that is employment security, the work security, representation security, income security, skill reproduction security, and the fair treatment in the job security. And the recent stream of literature, if we see, has started talking about decent work framework is not just a framework which has to be implemented by all employers. Rather, it is a moral right of all employees, regardless of the designation, regardless of the sector, regardless of the industry. So therefore, it becomes very important to understand how in jewelry manufacturing, gold jewelry manufacturing, this particular framework is followed regardless of whether it's a formal, informal, semi-formal, or any kind of manufacturing organization. So moving further, decent work has been analyzed from 3 perspectives. One is the macro, second is the meso, third is the micro. The macro level decent framework talks about the various government regulations. In the recent time, those who are from the manufacturing sector, they can understand there are 4 labor codes which has been proposed. It has not been implemented yet, whether it's a wage code, occupational health and safety code, industrial relation code, and social security code. And India is going through a labor reform recently, and therefore it becomes very important to understand how these regulations are going to impact the implementation of decent work framework. But in this study, we are not looking at the macro level of analysis of decent work. Rather, we are more interested into micro level of its analysis. The meso level is related to the firm level, where how organizations are strategizing various type of initiatives which is falling under the decent work framework, how they are influencing the the intent of the workers, how they are influencing the attitude of the employee through their various labor practices and offering various labor conditions. The third level is the micro level, which is how actually those intentions are translated into the practice form. So our study is focusing more on the micro level part, what is actually happening in the field, rather than just what your policy document or what regulation says about the labor management practices in this particular industry. So one of the reasons why we all are talking about the labor condition, working conditions, employment condition in this particular sector is, in the recent past we have seen hire and fire policy, which is the result of how the labor market has been transitioned to the free market, or the mode. So therefore, who are the major disadvantages group because of all these changes which is happening? It's a rural migrant worker. And just sharing information based on our field experience that we have gathered in the last 2 years while doing this project is, most of the manufacturers, they are getting their karigar artisan from the set is the West Bengal, Odisha and similar other states, and they are the migrant workers. Therefore, it becomes quite evident how they are being treated at workplace, how they are being managed at workplace. And research has also shown, if we are talking about the deficiency of decent work at various industry, its first group which gets the highest amount of heat is the rural migrant workers. Therefore, we have taken this particular framework to use here. And moving on, rationale for this study. So it's not about the gold jewelry manufacturing industry. In particular, we will talk about that. Globally also, the various developed and even the underdeveloped states we have seen, there is a deficiency of decent work. Though the employment opportunities are rising, but the component of decent work is deficient across the countries. So therefore, the recent agenda which International Labour Organization has come up for 2030 is sustainable economic development. Under the sustainable economic development, they have laid down around 17 goals. And interestingly and surprisingly, 2 goals are referring to. One of the goals, which is goal number 8, is creation of decent work. And second is the goal number 3, good health and well-being of the employees. So these 2 goals are the primary goals which will lead to the sustainable economic goals. So therefore, that gives us the another rationale that we should use this framework as a reference, and then we can understand where are the various deviations. Similarly, if I am talking about the Indian context, in 2011-12, ILO published a study in 2014 which says in India only 18.4% of the workforce is into regular employment. So what is the reason to share this information is because it is assumed that if you are in the regular employment, chances of having decent work is high. So now we can see there is a large section of the workforce in this country who is employed in the informal and unorganized sector. Therefore, what is the status of the decent work in those sectors? It becomes quite evident to understand what are the issues there. And furthermore, there are very few limited studies, especially in the gold jewelry manufacturing and in unorganized manufacturing sector, where how this particular framework has been seen from the perspective of human resource management, the human resource management models and the framework. Therefore, our study provides a unique contribution there by highlighting the where labor practices issues using the decent framework in the gold jewelry manufacturing sector. This actually further leads to the, based on the research gap that we have identified, which this study aims to attempt is, there are 4 broad research objectives. How the artisans are acquired and managed in informal jewelry manufacturing units and workshop. So we have developed a Karigar life cycle which has emerged from our data. What are the key features of employment conditions? What are the various features which is offered to the Karigars? What are the major challenges faced by the informal artisans and the Karigars? And then identifying the various HR strategies or labor strategies to improve the employment condition in the informal gold jewelry manufacturing sectors. So with these 4 broad objectives, we started our study. And the methodology that we have followed is it's a qualitative study. Within the qualitative study, we have followed the inductive approach. So inductive approach of the study, why it is important? Because this is one of those studies where we have actually visited the various workshops, talk to the Karigars, because they were not able to understand the English. In some of the cases, they were not able to understand Hindi. So we had a research team who understand the local language. Most of them are the Bengali Karigars. So we had the Bengali research associates who actually talked to them in the Bengali. Then we transcribed their transcription into Hindi and English, then analysis of the data happened. The reason why qualitative study? The qualitative study is conducted for those type of research questions where we don't have the idea about that particular phenomena. So we wanted to capture the perspective of the Karigars. So we talked to various industry experts, we talked to various intermediary, we talked to various jewelers. That is the part of a different study. Though we were still lacking that how Karigars actually feel about the decent work, what they feel about the working conditions and what are their real issues. For that, this methodology has been adopted, and there was lots of back and forth between the data and the literature when we were collecting data, because there was a huge database which we have created in the last 2 years. So if you see, there are 123 Karigars who were interviewed, focus group was conducted. And just brief demographic, given the paucity of the time, I would like to explain more the findings. So the average age of the Karigar, 32 years, 14 years of experience in the industry. So we can understand how much insight they had to offer about the employment condition in this industry. And on an average, the salary of all these employees who were working in the informal sector stand at 20,189 rupees. So this data also we collected because decent work framework requires that. Semi-formal sector, for a reference, we have collected some information, the basic information from those karigars also. They were not the permanent employees. Their average age 29 years, 14 experience, and their salary 17,033. From the formal sector, again, they are not permanent employees of the formal organization. Their age 35, experience 17, and their salary also standards 19,425. This is the average. So I think by mistake, I have not mentioned the standard deviation, but there is no much of deviation there. I think 1,000, 2,000 rupees. So this is the brief of how we have collected data from various organizations, and 123 karigars have participated. This is the glimpse of what I have already shown, the age group, qualification, total work experience, and the income data. So I am just directly getting into the finding. So finding also, I am not showing the quotes of the employees, again because of the time constraint. We have put into the table format. This is not the way where qualitative study has to be presented like this, but in case quotes are required, we can share later. So first dimension is the employment opportunity. Our finding is there is an alignment in this case in informal sector. Why? Many of the karigar informed us they tried different jobs at early stage but could not get the adequate income and employment continuity. The formal sector heavily depends on informal karigars, so there are ample amount of work and employment in this industry. So in this industry, even for the I will say semi-skilled workers or artisan, there is no dearth of jobs. So employment opportunities are available. There is abundance of jobs. Therefore, this dimension has been matched as per the decent work framework in this particular industry. Adequate earning and productive work. Yes, this is very interesting insight which we have found. Otherwise, if I compare with the other manufacturing industry or outsource employee or contract worker, income is always a problem. But in this industry, income is not a problem. Whether you go to formal sector, informal sector, semi-formal sector, you will find there is a consistency in the income based on the whether they are semi-skilled, whether they are fully skilled, or they are well-established karigar. So we have found overall the variation in the salary is ranging from 15,000 to 20,000, which is slightly above the minimum wages rate which prevails across. However, informal sector is least worried about the minimum wages because they are not supposed to follow the minimum wage or the labor codes. But still, as per our data, we have found the salaries that people are getting even in the informal sector, it is either at par with the minimum wage rate or somewhere it is even more than the minimum wage rate which has been decided by the respective state governments. So this alignment has been also found in our study. Where is the problem? Problem is the decent working time. So on an average, the karigar works around 14 to 16 hours, and during peak season, it has been found it actually exceeds further. So sometimes whole night they are supposed to work. So this is one of the deviation so I will explain later in my further slides why this deviation is there, what motivates the karigar to stretch along at workplace. Then balancing work, family and personal life. Since it is an informal sector, people are motivated by their salary system, they are motivated by the work, they are motivated by the quantum of work they are getting during these days. So there is a blur boundary between their work life and life and work. Many a times it has been seen that they are staying away from their family, and whenever during the lean phase they are getting some option, they are not getting the work. So that is basically their leave. So they go there for 15 days, 20 days, 1 month, again come back. So this kind of deviation can be seen in unstructured work arrangement, which is very much common in the informal sector. The next deviation which we have seen, stability and security of work, as just briefly I mentioned before, because work is not coming on the continuous basis when you are tied up with the particular informal workshop. The reason is because this industry is seasonal. And when your employment is not formal or structured, the chances of getting stable and secure work is quite impossible. So therefore, this deviation is there as per the decent work framework. Equal opportunity and treatment in employment. There is no as such discrimination in this particular industry, but only one thing which we have found in formal, informal, semi-formal, all sectors, though my focus is more on the informal sector, the participation of the women employee is almost zero. So there are various reasons for this. One of the reason is because this industry is dominated by the male members. Second, the transfer of knowledge. Since this industry is a traditional in nature, so the knowledge transfer happens from the male member to the fellow male member of the next generation. So women participation or the inclusion of the women in this particular sector restricts there. But though there are certain organizations, which maybe in the last slide I'll share, that there are certain manufacturers who have started experimented with the women artisans also. But for that, you need to provide different type of secure work environment and you have to invest there. So, but in informal sector, this deviation is there. Safe work environment, this is the another major problem which in this industry the karigars are facing. Karigar work with the lack of basic hygiene. So we have seen, so I will show you the picture at the end of the day. Literally when me, Professor Biju Varkkey and our research associate, when we visited this workshop, after visiting the workshop, we have to vomit. Because the kind of the environment which was there, 4, 5, 6 workers are sitting in a just small room. They eat there, they prepare food there, and hardly they wear any clothes because gold dust has to be recollected. So if they are wearing clothes and all, then recollection of the gold dust and all become difficult. So they are not wearing anything and they are not using the fan and other stuff, because if they are using the fan, again gold dust will go out from the window and that will be the loss of what you say gold. I'm talking about the informal sector. Formal have different arrangement for it. So in that way, and then lots of acid which is used, flame is there. All those things are there, which is quite dangerous for the life of the karigars, but still they are living their life in that particular condition. So safety is the major concern in this particular industry. Social security. There is no PF gratuity, as we know, because labor laws are not applicable to these type of what you say work arrangement. So naturally there is no social security, though as per the social security code which is going to be implemented by Government of India recently, even the unorganized employees can register, can have a social security. But right now when we collected the data, it's not implemented, and maybe in future we can see some social security for even unorganized workers. So whenever they need money, it is the head karigar who actually helps them with the money. Social dialogue, though there are few karigar association, but it is dysfunctional. So one of the major component of the decent work is, can you bargain for your wages, salaries and work conditions? But in this industry, those association and unions are missing. There is no union, but there are associations, but associations are dysfunctional. This is what karigars have shared with us. So based on our research, we have found this is the whole supply to end. It's an entry of the karigar to exit. I think the font size won't be visible, so I can just explain briefly. So karigar, how karigar joins this industry. So it's a quite interesting story. If you see, the karigars joins their or start their career from informal sector. Doesn't matter whether they have aspiration to become a karigar in the formal, big formal organization or not. Most of the karigars start their journey from the small workshop. Reason is because there is no formal training mechanism which even doesn't exist with the bigger organization also. Training requires investment time of 4 to 5 years, 2 to 3 years. Again, individual difference is there in terms of learning. So these people join at very young stage with their relative. Some maybe uncles are working there in some bigger organization or maybe some workshop. So these guys are associated with. Technical term which we see, it's a kind of on-job learning, job shadowing, which in HR we use those terms. But in this case, they are considered as the chokras. So the common terms that they use. So very early stage, these people join the uncle or any relative or the friend in the workshop they sit. So how much money they get? They don't get the money when they join this industry. And that is another discouragement for the young generation to join this industry. One is the time to learn. Second is the money at the early stage. So you are not getting money. What you are doing in the workshop, you are preparing food for all the karigars, because they are working busy, so you assist them on those domestic chores. And meanwhile, some part of the jewelry manufacturing skill is transferred in the workshop. So this is entry, and I also consider, which we have found in our study, is the barrier also to enter into this industry. So what is the next stage? Next stage is after 2 to 5 years, you learn the jewelry making. So you have the two options, third A, third B. You start working as skilled karigar in the informal independent workshop, or you can start working as skilled karigar in formal workshop or factory, because the formal organization prefers to have people who are having experience, who are having the skills. Then they have the options to provide opportunity for the people. Suppose after that, what is the fourth stage? Fourth stage is either you continue working as a karigar, head karigar till your retirement in the workshop itself, in the informal sector itself, or what we have seen the karigars are doing, after working 8 to 10 years, karigars start their own workshop in informal sector and continue till their lifelong. They bring more karigars. So that's why this line has been shown here is, from here they also contribute to the supply chain of the karigar again. So they created their own workshop here, and again they have contributed back to this particular box, which is the talent acquisition box. So what is the last stage? Those who start working as the independent, what you say, the karigars. Occupational change also happens after the retirement. Many of them are getting into the grocery, other type of businesses. And the second shift which happens in the later stage of the career of the karigar is they became the captive vendor or the captive manufacturer for the large organization, because they have the experience, they have the people, they have the karigars, so they start working for the large organization. And the third option is upward occupational movement, which means they are taking the role of a factory manager or production supervisor in the bigger organization. So when we see the whole framework, I am not able to explain each and every in detail, but if you see the glimpse of this whole talent management or the karigar life cycle from the starting till end, there is the separation of formal and informal sector. Basically, formal and informal sector coexist. Neither formal sector can survive without the informal sector, or informal can survive without the formal sector. And there is a beautiful combination and interlinkages across all these sectors. Therefore, it becomes quite interesting to understand how we can improve the labor condition, working condition, skill development of the employees working in informal sector, because at the end they are going to contribute to the formal sector itself. So the next is entry. I have shared earlier. The entry is basically through the social capital, because this industry is a trust-based industry. Trust-based industry in the labor practices, because you are handling the precious, metal. So from recruitment to retention and even exit, even allocation of the work, all depends upon the trust. And that trust is coming from the social network these karigars are having. Right from their acquisition, it's a relative, it's a friend, it's a very trustful person who recommend these people and bring them into this industry. So therefore, employer referral is commonly used even in the formal sector also. Then karigar acquisition, sourcing I have already explained, and formal sector only employs the experience or the lateral hires. Then what type of work arrangement works in this particular industry? The one very common which we have seen in all type of sector is the Babu system. So Babu is considered as the head karigar. So this head karigar has a karigar group of 4-5 person who is considered as Babu. He brings, based on the social capital and the network this fellow is having, because it's a trust. Why jeweler will give work to a informal Babu or any karigar when there is no trust? Because there is no agreement. Though some organization nowadays are having different mechanism to stop any kind of theft and all those things, but still given the kind of work and the volume is there, it's not possible to have that documentation work. So therefore trust is important, and Babu system is very commonly followed. So Babu is the head karigar who brings the work and the distribute among the all karigars in the workshop. Second is the gig workers or the freelancer, which is the technical term which we have borrowed. Now in the labor codes also this term has been defined. So who are the gig workers? These karigars are independent of workshop. So they are not tied up to one particular head karigar, rather they are working for n number of Babus. So their commitment and loyalty is not for one particular workshop, rather they are working for multiple workshops. Then the employed informal or semi-formal organization contract versus permanent. So basically in the formal organization also, one is the outsourced employee where you have hired on the contract. That is the fixed term contract, 6 months, 1 year or so. Second arrangement is you have not hired them as a contract worker, rather you have outsourced the work. So that is the third type of employment which all these informal employees are getting in this particular sector. The next question which we had, the employment conditions. So skill development, there is no formal training, whether it's a formal organization, semi-formal organization, informal organization, though there are few formal or large organizations where skill development has initiated. So maybe we are not discussing in this paper, but informal sector on-job training is happening through their transfer of knowledge which is happening within the social network of the Karigar where they are employed. And productivity, this is same across all sectors. This is quite interesting. Labor condition varies from formal to semi-formal to informal, but the productivity expectations and the salary remain same. The productivity around, which our data says 484.8 grams per month. Karigar almost during the month handles around 300 to 400 grams per month, and they work around 13 to 14 hours, 16 hours during the peak season. So this is the data from informal sector, but in formal and informal also we have seen similar productivity targets are given. Based on that, there are different type of compensation plan. One commonly compensation plan which is followed is 100% variable. Except few organization or workshop where small percentage of fixed salary is given and rest 70 to 80% is a variable. Then what is the basis of the variable? Basis of the variable is, as mentioned under the productivity, is the target which is given to them. Then how the compensation is calculated? So we also calculated various compensation plan to arrive at the final salary that they are getting. So one of the way is gold wastage. So gold wastage plus making charges. For different type of design and jewelry, there is a industry standard. This, suppose if it is a necklace, this is per gram rate which is given the making charges to the Karigar. Second is gold wastage plus fixed minimum wages. So some may be 7,000-8,000 rupees as a base salary, and remaining depending upon your productivity salary is given to you. So we have an Excel sheet where we calculated all these salaries. The salaries which we had shared, even here also it is shared, it comes around 19,562 rupees. So no matter whether you are paying the 100% variable and fixed, dust based, wastage based, your salary, the upper limit is almost same across all these sector, which comes around for an average Karigar 19,506. Though there can be certain variation depending upon the design complexity, depending upon the intent of the organization and other, but on an average this is what is coming. For head Karigar it comes around 45,000 rupees per month. Yes. Now why this deviation? As I mentioned, this in this industry skill development and skill reproduction is a problem. Therefore kinship at workplace is common. So it's only relative and those employer referrals, which is one of the way to bring people, and this is the way to get the business also. Willful servitude is something which very interestingly we have found, and I would like to just focus one minute on this because very interesting this thing. What is willful servitude? Willful servitude is when no one is forcing you to behave like a servant employee. This is my willingness to work as a servant employee. And why that is happening? As I would like to connect with the compensation plan. Compensation is 100% variable, which is the case in any sales organization also we see. So when there is 100% of variable salary, the Karigars are in an impression that if we work more, if we stretch more, our productivity will rise and we will earn more. But in terms of the wage rate, if we see the last 5, 6, 7 years of the wage rate or the gold wastage rate or even the per gram rate which is given to the Karigar, it is coming down because it's a precious metal. The rate is changing. So rate is market driven. They are trying to increase the productivity so that their salary can increase, but that is not happening. And in this whole process, they are compromising on the working condition. And another reason for the poor working condition is the cost cutting by the head Karigars, because they have to feed all 6, 7 or 10 Karigar in a room. And there also rates are fixed. from wherever they are getting the work. So given these two factors we have seen, this is one of the reason for deviation which is happening in this industry. Cost sensitivity I have explained. Challenges, physical and the medical challenges they are facing, and there is a huge crunch of young talent, and this is quite resembling with the construction industry, mining industry, or any hazardous industry where organizations are not able to develop employee value proposition because this is no more lucrative industry, and same with this industry. So the only entry, only attraction, or only way through which Karigar are getting attracted is through their referrals, through the, what you say, the relative and social capital. So that is the challenge for this industry, and there is no absence, there is absence of union and this thing. So this is the working condition. You can see how Karigars works in the informal sector. All these places we have visited, so some of those we have shared. So this is the, this is how on the small pieces they work. As I shared, they don't prefer to wear anything because of the gold dust recollection. But there are few framework which is used in the formal, which in our final report we are going to share is how we can improve this. So I will not focus more on this. There are Mr. Perfect by one of the organization, leading organization, responsible sourcing by one of the leading organization, captive model where they are identifying the vendor and trying to improve their work condition, that is also coming up. Ankur Hati in Kolkata is a kind of platform where they are bringing all these informal workers to give them a very nice space and working condition. There are so many Karigar parks and other things which is emerging that can actually bring some professionalism, skill reproduction and other stuff which can improve this industry. So this is Ankur Hati working condition. Same worker, same work, but you can see they are sitting on the chairs, they have nice space, they have very nice working conditions and all those things. Yes, thank you. Any questions, any comments?
So you said 123 Karigars. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the geographical distribution, the companies that they are associated with, without perhaps revealing the names, if that is the case? The kind of jewelry that they are producing at the different locations and so on.
Yeah, so we collected data from 3 major manufacturing cluster. One is the West Bengal, the east side. There are 2-3 places in Calcutta. Medinipur is there, Bau Bazaar is there. One more place is there where we have visited, that in Delhi, Chandni Chowk and various other places where we have visited. Similarly, we went to Bangalore. There also we visited 2-3 workshop. And from these 3 clusters, we have collected data from these workers. Jewelries, necklace, they were there into necklace, bangles, different type of ornaments they were into. I think in the table somewhere I had mentioned also, which I think I missed. We don't have, okay.
So, based on what you were saying, so it reminded me of one of Tanish's ad campaigns on Dua Ka Sona, and now it seems like, is that really so, or is the reality different? But
at this moment, because we cannot comment on that particular organization, because it is only evidence from informal sector.
But they would depend on.
But in 60 to 70% of the manufacturing, even in the formal sector, also happens through informal sectors. But yes, every organizations, the big organization now getting into the responsible outsourcing, they are also focusing on the working condition, though there is a long journey to go.
Yes, and the second thing this reminded me of was the direct contrast. That is, when we think of Swiss watches, very often they also show the artisan working on that, and the craftsmanship is emphasized. So is there some kind of commodification going on in the jewellery industry, that you get these nice looking products, but beyond the looks there is nothing, there is no value? And like a watch, where the watch looks quite similar, the watches look similar, but there is a craftsmanship value.
This is something which right from day one, when we got into it, he has been emphasizing on it, is that the craftsmanship has not been really emphasized. Look, at a very private level, what we noticed is that these people have pride in craftsmanship. Okay, they're proud about what they do. Okay, but now, does it really transmit to the customers? Do they get social value out of it? The answer, I'm very clear, is no. Because one of the very, very interesting things which we went is Harish was there, where we met one of a much valued craftsman in one of the Delhi places. He knew IIMs. Okay, because he said that I have a son who is an engineer, a daughter who is a graduate, and possibly he is looking for his son and daughter to possibly choose between an IT company or an MBA, and that is the level which he's sitting in a workshop in Chandni Chowk and actually doing it. Now, because of the fact that, look, this is not really valued or anything, they look forward for possibly social mobility of the children and encourage them to exit the industry. And that is one of the big challenges I think the sector is going to face. In fact, I said that it is a little bit, I think, slightly more to look at. That sector requires actually some sort of a career branding. Okay, if a GE or an IBM can talk about employer branding, maybe you might have to talk about a career branding and showcase the career. That is something, yes.
If I can just add to that comment, that is right now the career branding is actually in the service charges, the making charges. That is the only premium that is coming. And if we look at the gold, the value of the gold is just the metal and the making charges and maybe the beauty or the looks of it. But beyond that, the craft that has gone into...
Yeah, that is, and now going back to the earlier discussion, I'm not a marketing person, but I would actually look at it from a human perspective. When you say that zero making charges, what are you signaling? The career is coming free.
In fact, the more the making charges...
So there is, I think, an indirect signal which says that, like, this is commodification, this is a dispensable commodity, and I won't be surprised as Mr. Karir, I'm taking your, win from what you plan to take is that tomorrow if a 3D printing machine comes, okay, operating a 3D printing machine might be...
I have few questions and my opinions as well here. The first question is related to the sample size and distribution. I'm still not convinced that the mean you have arrived at around 20,000 for a career in informal sector. I still see people working for as low as 5,000 or 7,000 rupees a month. So I have a question about collection of the data, sample size, sample distribution, and while tabulating it, you should have come across the mean deviation as well in that case, because I think this 120 sample size is too small to conduct this kind of a study. That is first thing. Second, yes, let me be honest here. My fellows from industry are also present here. The industry, I always say, is one of the worst violators of human rights. And as you have seen, the working conditions prevalent everywhere. In the informal markets, the practice goes on. In my opinion, the primary reason behind this is the mindset of the consumer in India, where the industry has painted a picture of this industry and presenting a product, not a commodity. You have rightly mentioned that the product is being sold and supplied as a commodity now, where the customer has only one thing in mind that comes as a priority is price. India is primarily a price sensitive market, and rarely I see customers or the end users actually respecting, honoring or acknowledging or appreciating a piece of fine craftsmanship. So I have this, there are two ends of this entire supply chain. I have been there yesterday as well, and I was jokingly mentioning this to Mr. Professor Arvind Saha as well. While conducting these studies and researches, the focus primarily is on the import, supply, gold, mining, sourcing, and rarely somebody conducts a study about craftsmanship, availability of skill, distribution of the skill across the country, and so on, availability of skill as well. And I predicted this to sir as well this morning, that there will be a day in our industry when there will be no karigar. Instead, there will be CAD workers or CAD designers sitting on the desks and printing their output on a small, just the size of mixer grinder printer on the side of their desk. That is going to happen very soon. Technology, yes, the costs have come down, and that is where the human capital or the human resources, the Indians have this habit of comparing everything in terms of costs and prices. So I see that there is no cost or no price. I am mentioning cost or no price for a fine piece of craftsmanship. That is there. So two key stakeholders, one is the karigar and the other end, at the other end is the consumer. Both are being ignored and forgotten completely. Quality is being ignored. Quality has taken a backseat. I am also one of the MTD 10 committee members with the BIS, Precious Metals Committee. And whenever there are standards or these things are being discussed, the most of the time, whenever the regulations are being discussed, always the industry has this, quality is not my job. वो हॉलमार्किंग सेंटर करेगा, लैब करेगा, ये मेरा काम नहीं है. And most of the sellers or retailers or the large businesses in the country, in their opinion, quality is the responsibility of only the karigars or only the manufacturers. Unfortunately, nobody is willing to take ownership of the quality. Mr. James Jose is also probably here, and he would agree to that. James ji, hain kya aap? Because you mentioned me, I want to mention you, right? So, whenever there are debates over the quality, because I see purity as part of the entire product quality, one key component of the product quality. So, whenever the quality is discussed, each and every stakeholder is of the opinion, it is not my job. मेरा काम नहीं है, वो कारीगर है, वो ठीक नहीं बनाता है, कारीगर चोर है, मैन्युफैक्चरर चोर है, वो डिसऑनेस्टी करता है. It has become a practice. So, I think the time has come when the industry starts thinking about this big gap in the skills, the approach to quality and everything.
Yeah, we can't.
So
we
I would again suggest you to do a larger sample with a large sample distribution as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, this study initially was a qualitative study. We looked into it, and as you see somewhere, the standard deviations were very high. And we should also look at it. There is an old sect of what you call as the chokra, and what you call karigar under training, who possibly gets.
Chokras are only in some parts of the country. West Bengal, they are
So, and that continues for a couple of years, whose compensation is pretty low, and we haven't actually covered that. That's a mistake. We will say that we haven't really talked to these people, primarily because these people were either, when we visited the workshops, they were busy washing clothes or cooking, and they were only allowed to look at us from behind the doors. They were never brought to the photo, but it's a very long period of apprenticeship which people, where people are in a way groomed into this sort of a work, and maybe over a period of time they tend to start liking it, or they have a preference for that. Yeah. That's what we think, and we will definitely look at, maybe at the next stage, a larger study of quantitative study would actually bring in. We will also realize that yes, quality, the focus on karigar and the karigar's quality of work, okay, in a scientific manner is actually missing, except if you look into some of the formal companies which we have seen, which includes yours, where there is focus in terms of actually telling the karigar what to do. Otherwise, it's just the karigar's own perception of quality what matters. Let me also add one more thing, one very interesting thing which we found in the first time when we went into one of the workshops in Bombay. You know, we asked them, how do they innovate? How do they come up with designs? They said that they are very good in searching the net. Okay, so what we are getting is, in a way, a little bit of replication. Okay, and which talks about lack of human capital development in the sector. You're very correct, and I think industry elders, one of the things is that they're all talking about it, but not really getting translated into action, and that is where a big gap is coming up.
Yes.
Professor Jha, Professor Varkkey, I must say this has been a well-compiled report, though it is supposed to be still WIP. The very fact that you talked about SDGs is something that the industry has still not realized, and there is a deadline for us to be compliant with it, 2030. So it has to be a top-down view, and none of our trade associations really know about it, let alone talk about it during their events and conventions. So that's a very key element that you need to push in. And here, not wanting to steal Somsar's thunder, World Gold Council has come up with Swarna Adarsh Abhiyan. That's a fantastic program again, where they have a code of conduct which includes the basic SDG principles. And there's also Responsible Jewelry Council, of which I am a part of as well. So the key factor here is information dissemination within the industry bodies is actually abysmally low. That's one point. And two, we talked about Ankurati. Fortunately, now some of the governments have woken up to the fact, especially West Bengal government, there's a convention, a full-day workshop and convention on the 19th at Ankurati to debate and chart out ways and means of improving the lot of the informal artisanal group, the Karigar group. So there has to be, and I believe strongly that Professor Sahai and India Gold Policy Center should become the focal entity to push for, because with the IIMA and IGPC branding, you have that much more credibility than most of the other institutions in this, and it's happy. It's one is happy to see that there's a collaboration amongst different institutes, XLRI and St. Joseph's Institute, Business Management Institute, etc. So it actually has to get driven from your end in the real sense. So that would do a yeoman service to the trade. And also as consumers, all of us wear multiple hats. As consumers, we need to start questioning ourselves that why are we expecting these kind of discounts and rebates, etc., when we go and pick up a piece of jewelry, rather than appreciating the craftsmanship that is there. And that's how the branding of craftsmanship can be started. And so there has to be a groundswell kind of a revolution in terms of consumer awareness even. So I think it's a commendable job that is being done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any last points? So thanks to all those who participated, but then we look forward for more cooperation, support from you in the future studies. We will reach out to you in terms of collecting data. It was not an easy journey. Personally, I think it was also to accept that reality, as we said, is that when we really come out from the Karigar parks, it was like maybe from our own standards of hygiene, we couldn't really stand. So it's a very, very different world. Maybe, some of the people who are involved in the trade once in a while should make a study tour to such places. Then you actually can feel it only after you really go there and see it. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A piece of information and discussion. I think when anything, even if it's gold gets a human face, you connect to it so much more. And in a country where every mother, every grandmother has a story attached to her wedding or something, I don't think innovation in jewelry is going to be a problem. So moving on, we are now going to have a panel discussion on HRM practices working. Oh, sorry, that's been covered. Now the discussion is on the social impact and context to gold and jewelry industry. And Mr. Sundaram is, okay. So this is being moderated by Mr. Harish Chopra from IGPC. And I would like to invite Ms. Sonvi Khanna on the stage, please. Okay, she's joining us online. She holds a master's degree in international relations from the University of Warwick and has been working with Dasra for 8 years. Dasra, meaning enlightened giving in Sanskrit, is a pioneering strategic philanthropic organization that aims to transform India, where a billion thrive with dignity and equity. Her areas of interest are in human rights and development of industries by taking society along. And Dr. Prabhakar Sangurmath will also be joining us online. And Professor Varkkey. So, if you please take the dais again. Okay. Harish, I think you also need to come.
Good afternoon. That's an excellent work which is in progress and on the human resource practices in the gold industry. And so I've been privy to some of those field visits. So I have accompanied Professor Varkkey and Professor Jha. And so what they mentioned, the kind of extensive work which they have done, I actually can vouch for that because I was physically present there in those daily locations as well. Coming to the next session, this is a subject which, in fact, I find it very difficult as a moderator, and also the industry also finds it difficult when they are they also have to respond to these things. So we have an expert panel. Professor Varkkey is there. I also have Sanvi Khanna, who is joining us online. And I think we start with Sanvi. Anu has already given her introduction, so I'm not going to go into that again. Sanvi is already, I think, online for quite some time. So over to Sanvi, if you can start the session, please.
Yeah. Sure. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Loud. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I have to admit right at the start that I'm no expert in the gold industry. However, I'm bringing to you here learnings from a sector agnostic initiative called the Social Compact that was initiated in 2020 right after the first wave of the pandemic in collaboration with industry and non-profits. It's largely prompted by the exodus we saw of millions of informal workers and migrant workers right after the first lockdown. Where some of the industry leaders in contact with us came out quite candidly and said, well, we can be sure that those on our shop floors are well taken care of. We can't, in fact, be sure that nobody from our value chains is not on the road right now. And that's how the compact was conceived as an industry non-profit initiative which brings together industry leaders and labor rights organizations that have the insight and the experience of working with informally engaged workers within industry. And so we are looking at 3 categories of workers across industries which span companies such as Piramal Pharma, Bajaj Auto, Forbes Marshall, Thermax, Godrej Properties, as well as MSMEs such as Gibbs Foods, KKNAG, and a few others. But the idea was to boil the problem down, the problem we saw which brought people from across industries to the road, to the few human-centric vulnerabilities and therefore human-centric outcomes that across industry need to be embraced and worked upon, not only by principal employers but by the supply chain. And we basically reduced it to 6 key vulnerabilities that brought these workers down to the road. One was wages, which is not just about minimum wages, but wages on which you can live and don't have to choose between medicines, food, and sending your children to school. The second and third were risk work-based, an occupational health and safety as opposed to safety and health measures that depend on the formality of your contract. The fourth was looking at gender parity. It is not just the gold sector, it is across industry, whether it's manufacturing or whether it is construction, that the representation of women in visible work is actually mighty low. And it's not just about the representation, it's also about parity in treatment, wages, and opportunities. And so that was the fourth outcome that the compacts brought to industry and said you've got to focus upon it. As we were building back, we thought, should we only focus on building back and just addressing vulnerabilities, or should we actually be building for the future? And so two aspirational outcomes is what we brought into the picture. One, the gold industry would find very valuable to discuss is the future of work and the mighty synergy between the future of an industry, its ability to reach its full potential, and its ability to mine the potential of those that are contributing to business and to industry, no matter in what formal or informal capacity. And the last was access to entitlements. The same 200 million workers across industries in India who are informally engaged within the formal sector are also the subject of the government to provide a whole host of entitlements. So pushing industry to offer mandate to our non-profits to come into industrial hubs, set up worker facilitation centers, and connect these workers to what they are entitled to from the government, while industry itself looks into its practices and improves business as usual. And so we basically converted these 6 outcomes into 35 odd standards, and I see that the Swan Abhiyan has also done something like a code of conduct. Our self-reflection tool, which is the first step we offer to any of our companies, actually helps them assess themselves on those practices and then corroborate what they think are the majority of their practices with on-ground site visits by our non-profit partners. And everything that I'm telling you right now and the companies that I have just shared the names of, everything is happening in those companies as well as we speak. This basically allows the company headquarters to get a real sense from the ground of whether the policy is really working or not, whether what they are thinking at the headquarter level is actually translating into impact on the ground. And basis this, we offer them a recommendation, that on what they can improve, both in the short, medium, and long term, systemically. In addition to systemic improvements, which I think is critical for any company to take on, there is importance in building a network of solutions. So if the industry does not understand how to ensure fresh facilities for its female workers, let's create that ecosystem and offer those NGOs that provide the fresh facilities and connect them to that. If they do not understand how ESIC is insured for workers who are 6 months or 8 months engaged with you, let's get the consultants and connect you to that so that you can insure it not only for yourselves but for your supply chain. And so we are creating this network across industries as well to help them get on this track of improvement. But more importantly, I want to focus on 3 principles. One, we've got to break the problem down into smaller, manageable pieces on which we can take ownership. And so while the problem of disparate worker practices lies largely in the MSMEs and the more informal parts of the formal sector, there is a principal employer or multiple principal employers who are actually connected to these and drawing value from these MSMEs and this informal setup. And so the social compact puts the onus on the principal employers to not take charge of the whole world, the whole industry, but to take charge of consistent worker practices in their value chain and not just supply chain. So not just under them, but also above them, right? And so when we look at gold, where you're sourcing and where you're giving is all part of the value chain that one has to ensure consistent worker practices in along these 6 outcome areas. The second thing that we have learned in our work, we are currently working with 40 companies, both principal and supply chain included, across India and across sectors. A big learning for us is that there needs to be a community of practice. Very often, what is wrong finds its way around by way of the grapevine and is reinforced and soon becomes the norm that everybody follows. Unfortunately, that does not happen for what is going well, or the improvements that the company is making, because we feel that it's too small to talk about it, or why should I talk about it, etc. So we are proactively creating a community of practice that is again sector agnostic. So if you're a company within the gold industry that is taking proactive measures to improve worker practices for yourselves and for your value chain, join the compact and talk about it, because there is learning in it that other companies can take. Just like the vulnerabilities of your workers are pretty comparable and can be reduced to a few basics, the journey or the risks that any company, any principal employer takes to ensure these practices in the value chain are also very comparable. And as leaders of industry, it is important to share those notes and create positive peer pressure and talk about it. The last thing is a sector-wide view that we are encouraging all industries to take for themselves. So if you are a construction sector, for instance, and we just published a report with Godrej Properties on the construction sector last year, it basically pushes you to see what is the future you are aspiring as an industry. Therefore, what are the skill sets you will require in a 10 to 15 year horizon? Where is your workforce today? Not only those who are formally engaged with you, but building the mechanisms for mapping skills today for even those who are engaged with you as daily wage workers or as 6 monthly contractual workers, which are seasonal contractors. And then taking them on that journey of upskilling, which is so uncommon for the blue-collared, informally engaged worker as opposed to the white-collared, fully employed worker on your payroll. But it is the difference between industries that will achieve their full potential in a 15-year horizon while taking the workers along, as opposed to those who will try to inch towards their full potential through more and more practices that actually go towards a race to the bottom. Okay. And the last thing, if I may, just by way of summing up, the time for doing this could not be better than now. There is a heightened realization on the human aspect of business. There is a heightened demand in global supply chains as well as among investors across industry to ensure ESG, the environmental, social and governance principles of business. India is at a point where SEBI is asking that all companies, especially the ones that are top 1,000 companies by market capitalization, to start publicly disclosing annually what is the level of knowledge they have on not only their own practices, but for their supplier and contractual worker practices. And so it seems to be the right time for taking this very seriously, being ahead rather than catching up, and actually pushing India as the speaker, the person who was saying the question before me was saying, there is a groundswell that is required. It has to be a change in aspiration, not in laws. The laws are a supportive mechanism, but big changes here. And we are seeing that the minute the companies start to see the real reality on the ground in their own companies and supply chains, it's hard to swallow. Okay. And I think that's the first step. Creating greater visibility, acknowledging that all workers, irrespective of how they are engaged within your value chain, are your responsibility, because it is a collective, and this point was made in the morning also by Mr. Mehra, it is a collective aspiration and therefore a collective journey, a collective reputation and therefore a collective reputational risk, which will ensure whether any industry gets the respect and parity that it deserves in the global market. And so seeing, not only trying to just save yourself and sort of your little company is not going to go very far if the industry does not have a reputation that can be trusted by investors and consumers alike. I'll stop here and will be happy to share more thoughts, more specifics, and answer any questions. But thank you very much, and I look forward to engaging with industry associations within the gold industry as well. If there is anything that can be replicated, we'll be very happy to take it forward.
So, in fact, if we talk about your experiences and when we compare it with the gold industry as such, So the workers here are like highly skilled. They are involved into manufacturing or shaping up the fine arts, you know, and which potentially has a very high value, which industry also keeps on blaming it on the consumers, but actually the consumer will only buy what is offered. And if you are actually offering something which is like, you know, with the pricing is a point where consumer has to make a decision, he will definitely go for something which is available cheaper. So that's one thing which I think industry can lead from that front. But even on the workers, when we talk about the informal workers in this sector, so the informal workers are like, this is my experience, very limited experience which I have. Nothing compared to what you have seen in other sectors. But what I see here is that many of them are doing what they are doing based on their choice. And so it's not that this was the only thing and they have been pushed into this. And many of them are finding some value in this, and that's how they are. But still, I'm definitely being in marketing, I will talk about the industry also many times. But I also have to, you know, that awakening also has to come from the needs of the workers as well. So they also need to see that they need to be more exposed to what is happening to the other sectors, and so that, you know, they also are looking forward. So do you see any kind of similarities which, or some practices which can be adopted by the industry, which we are talking about here?
When you say similarities, on what front? Are you talking about building the aspiration of the workers?
If we are talking about the social compact, so like, so do we, like, if the industry, the gold industry has to move into that direction, so
yes.
How do we, what is the first step? And given all those parameters which I've mentioned, so what do you think should be the sequence of things? And I've given you the
yes.
limitations from the product side and also from the worker side also. And so how do you put that in an order?
Yes, so I would, for your industry, as we said, to construction as well, I would prioritize the future of work aspect and the trust aspect, right? So nobody is going to trust you with more hours of their time to skill them if they cannot trust you to pay them the requisite amount of wages that will keep them alive and well in those 12 hours, 14 hours that they are working for you. So there's a very big connection between trust today and therefore trust tomorrow, right? And investing value today to invest greater and reap greater value tomorrow. So I think starting wages and occupational safety and health are the here and now that has to be ensured, and you cannot be complacent with saying that people in my factory are okay, because the reputation of your product is the cumulative reputation of your chain, not just of your shop floor. And so if you're not able to ensure that people who are adding value to that curry that is being produced in a small shop and being supplied to you, you are going to face the reputational risk, as we see in any other sector. You're seeing it every day in the papers. And H&M is being called out because some supplier down somewhere had a posh case, right? Or there was malfunctioning in the food of a supplier of a big multinational IT company. And so the distance that one had mentally created between the people we source from or we produce to and our own reputation as a company that is sitting at the apex of a chain needs to be challenged, because that doesn't exist anymore. If a worker is adding value to your business and ensuring the stability of your business, the productivity of the business, you need to acknowledge your responsibility towards them. It was industries that were able to do that in the first wave of the pandemic, that were able to restart almost 10 days of the lockdown lifting, as opposed to those who did not do that and had to face almost a quarter to 2 quarters of losses to resume business. So trust today is critical to ensuring that you're able to engage them in आप कल क्या बनेंगे और आप कल क्या add करेंगे as value to the industry conversation, because we are seeing that employers who just get into skilling because it's easy to do, you can have a CSR set up and you can easily send your workers there as opposed to other workers also and get them into skilling. Those centers run empty because there is no value seen in tomorrow if there isn't stability and value today. So investing in correcting and ensuring that your workers are getting wages that can help them live in the city, in the town that they are staying. Their children are going to a school and are not just rummaging around, that their health and their safety is not something that you decide by the nature of the contract. We see this in every sector, that if the formally employed worker is wearing a high quality PPE kit, a high quality helmet, I'm speaking of manufacturing and construction here to talk that, the same job, the contracted worker is wearing a poor quality one, low boots, half the uniform. How can safety and health be determined by the nature of your contract? There is clearly something wrong, right? And a part of it is the law, that we will only follow the law. We have no sense of human value, and we have no sense of what this person is. Industry sees labor as a risk to be mitigated. That needs to stop in India, where our numbers can be our strength, and we only see them as a herd to be moved around as we see fit. Right? And in there lies the unharnessed, untapped potential of engaging them then, taking them from trust to then trusted future, engaging them in skilling in line with where you want to take not only your company but industry as a whole, and creating that pipeline. The other thing we see, and we saw this in construction as well, is that every company knows which is the source of your workforce. You know the source geographies where your largest amount of workforce comes from on a seasonal, circular migration or permanent basis. Why don't we go there and start skilling workers right there in line with what we are seeing the need here? Because a lot of them, like we already heard in the previous panel, just follow their uncles and brothers into the city without any sense of why they are coming, what they are going to become, and what they need to have as a prerequisite to get a good income there. And then get abused and put in setups where it takes them 5 years to get any kind of income or learning in the first place. So thinking of the connection between the future of workers and the future of industry is something that needs to be established across industry in India. And it has, I just want to say that, Harish, that actually there's a case study in the white-collared story. The white-collared worker was not where he or she is today, 20 years back. We were trained to be clerks, not ideators. But something changed in the 90s with the globalization of our economy and the opening up of our exposure to how the white-collared worker is treated outside. But today, across levels in our companies, the white-collared worker is engaged in ideation for the business. And that has unleashed the entrepreneurial spirit in the country, where so many young 22-year-olds are coming up with business ideas. Where did this come from? The clerk training to the 20-year-old high-tech business entrepreneur. So there is, something has to change in the aspiration, something has to change at the top in what you offer to the worker, because the worker who is living on the edge, and we saw the edge in the first wave of the pandemic, cannot dream big. You have to make it available. You have to make it real, touchable, feelable, that you have the space, your month is taken care of. You don't have to choose between food and health expenses. Once you create that sense of security, the person can think like you and me think about what is our future, what is our aspiration, what do we want to learn. Khali पेट भजन नहीं होता है, किसी का भी नहीं, right? So you cannot expect कि वो ट्रेनिंग में भी बैठेंगे 4 घंटे और 14 घंटे का काम भी करेंगे पर तनख्वाह नहीं लेंगे, जिसमें मुश्किल से कुछ चल जाए, right? So this mindset change is what we are pushing for industry. And I want to share with you that we are not just working with principal employers in the supply chain. There is a social compact committee within FICCI and CII that is pushing this agenda and enrolling more and more companies into this way of thinking. Because that is clearly the place where advocacy for industry policy and pushing this and mainstreaming this has to come from.
Okay.
So just like we are creating this bridge between the supply chain and the principal employer, the chain between principal employers and industry associations also needs to be reinforced.
Okay, so before we move to the next speaker, do we have any questions from the audience for Sanvi? Okay, so over to Professor Prabhakar, I think he's been waiting for quite some time, and do we have him online? Yeah, he can share his experience in the mining industry and
Yes. Namaste, sir. I'm I'm audible?
yes, you are.
Yes, sir. I'm very much thankful to the IGPC for giving me this opportunity. Mainly, our studies is on the gold exploration and mining and rural development. That is the main thrust area. Who is the by mining we can do the rural development activities and all. Only 1 minute I will give the background information. During 1894, just 1894 I am telling. 1894, the production of the gold in India is a 5.3 tons. Then the gold sale price is only a two rupees 50 paisa per gram. The same gold production has reached 15 tons in 1906. The present gold production is only 1.6 tons, where the gold rate is 5,000 rupees per gram. This is a great opportunity for us now to increase our gold production. Presently, the various government and private agencies have proved about a 585 tons of the gold metal in the country, in about mainly at the 11 different states of our country. This has to be upgraded by substantial drilling and mining for the mining feasibility studies. However, the gold exploration and mining is a very risky venture. Suppose if you do the 1,000 mineral prospects exploration, only one will become the mine. So now we have to main things for our gold production. If you start then gold production or gold mining, then only employment opportunities will come. For that thing, main problems are for the industry is regulatory changes, taxation and infrastructure. Because some of the, after globalization and privatization, many government and private agencies have done the investment and carried out the exploration. Subsequently, recently amendments have come. Now we have to go for the everything else, we have to follow the auction procedures. Second, taxation policy. Whereas our taxation policy is roughly about a 60%, which is a very high. You should be within a permissible limit. You should be within a 30-35%. Coming to the infrastructure facilities, we can say that all the mineral deposits, especially gold and all, are in the very interior part. Very interior part. Just I'll quote in one example. I have carried out the intensive exploration in Kerala in Wayanad, Nilam area. There are about 40 gold deposits I have identified. In such a interior area it was there, very interior area, here we cannot have any mobiles, any jeeps or anything else. We are staying in a very interior jungle. Just I am telling you about my 20 years back story. Then my father is expired in Hubli by heart attack. I got information after 3 days. Such is the situation of working of the mining areas and all those things. Such interior. There we require now a lot of improvement. Now little bit this investment and regulatory progress and industry has the potential to grow slowly. Now we have got a lot of the good gold deposits have been explored. We can enhance our gold productions by opening up of these new mines. For that thing, now supporting certain challenges are there. Now certain auctioning is there. In the recently in Karnataka, about 8 gold mines have been auctioned. Some of the private peoples have been, even government people, organizations are participating in that one. By that one, definitely job opportunities will improve. That improvement will be there in the finance. Our aim will be resource mobilization and gold reserves maximization. By that thing, things will improve. For that thing, suppose tomorrow if everything goes, there are about nearly 15 gold mines can be opened up by auctioning and all the things, whatever procedures we are following up that one. Suppose if you start a 15 gold mines, we have got an opportunity. All these gold mines will be small gold mines, where only mining will be there, and metallurgical engineering complexes has to be taken up in the other areas like a satellite gold mines only want to work. The direct employment opportunities will be about nearly 500 to 600 workers per mine.
But will we have better working conditions for them?
Yeah, I'm coming to that point. Sir. So, for them, then about 4,500 indirect workers will be there. This one. By that one, really, we have got nearly to 80 to 1 lakh people can be employed. For that thing, now, for all the workers, all the basic facilities has to be provided, because that is a statutory. All the statutory departments, like whatever we are getting a permissions for the mining leases and all, that all the Department of Mines and Geology, Pollution Control Board, Director General Mine Safety, Labor Departments, and also trade unions will be there to take care of them. For all these things, we have to follow the norms and we have to give the skill developments, because earlier all the mine workers will be the 3 kilometers together we used to go. Kolar gold mine has gone a 3 kilometers. Now Hatti gold mine is about a 1 to 1.5 kilometer depth. Laborers are going and working there. Now mechanization has been done. Lot of machineries have been deployed. Good ventilation system has been made, and health system has also been improved. For all these things, we have carried out the preliminary studies of all those things like that one and all. Now, for all these studies, we have identified about nearly 15 localities for the studies. In that one, as on date today in India, only one gold mine is working in Karnataka, that is a Hatti gold mine. And Kolar gold mine is closed way back. Now, other gold mines are waiting for the clearances from the government. There, first we have to study about the public health, their education, water supply and its quality, transport and communication, drainage and sanitation, women and child welfare there, then skill development, like a tourism. Why I am telling tourism? Why we have to create a job opportunities for all those things, like Kolar gold mine. Now Kolar gold mine, because of the deep mining, we cannot open it. We can make a tourism center. There also we can create a job opportunities for all these workers and for the rural development. With these things, for every ton of the gold mine, about 100 to 120 crores. For every ton of the gold mine, about 100 to 120 crores goes into the rural economy in the form of wages, ancillary industries, skill development, materials, machinery supply, housing, health, roads, etc., and to serve to elevate the poverty to a certain degrees. So, with these things, we have to carry a lot of studies, and also by the CSR also efforts are there for eradication of the literacy and minimizing the child and child labors and poverty, affordable health around the villages.
Dr. Prabhakar, if you have to just sum it up, like how do you think that how much progress have we made on both these fronts?
Yes, sir. For this thing, just I am summing up of that one.
Yeah.
For that thing, We are studying the core and buffer zone of the study area and regional development analysis and private and public participations by that on how it can be elevated, and skill development and sustainability by income generation and livelihood, awareness about the villages by utilizing the CSR and DMF fund and other government facilities for all those things, sir. For that thing, because of the COVID, we cannot do the much field work. We carried out these things, the preliminary studies. Definitely, there is a lot of scope for that one. There is an improvement of the rural development by opening up of the new mines, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So moving on to Professor Varkkey, and in fact, if you look at it, the industry has really made a tremendous growth. But have the lives of the people associated, the workers associated with this industry, which is an integral part, do you think, because you have been doing that study, going on the field yourself, so what you have to say about that? Do you think they are actually moving into that direction where the next generation say that we want to be in this industry by choice?
Yeah, okay. So I'll put it up quickly, building up on a couple of this thing. I wanted to actually look at it from a human capital development, skill development perspective. That's what. Here is an industry who is aspiring to, sorry if I am being a little bit cynical, aspiring to sell to the Europeans, but chasing the diaspora. There is a fundamental issue in the old model, because you have maybe standards, aesthetics, as well as quality, which is an issue which comes as part of a human capability. And if that human capability down to the end of the supply chain is not developed, I think you have a problem in hand. Okay, so, and one of the very interesting analysis which once me and Professor Jatinder was talking about, I think we forgot to pick it up, but now I understand, is that this whole thing of the industry revolves around particularly working conditions and remuneration, compensation of the workers, remunerates around this concept called waste. Okay, the waste becoming so integral to it. The whole architecture of compensation is around waste and waste reductions. Can you actually deconstruct that and look at maybe, use technology to what you call reduce the waste?
Or maybe take that as a cost?
Yeah. Some models which actually would build into the old process in terms of really looking at it, and that may be able to look at it. And then how do you really reward? Like, you have an whole chain including whole number of self-employed people, and they are going to continue, because I teach a course on future of work, and non-standard contracts are the way to go forward. But it's that non-standard contracts till now has been abusive, but that does not mean that it should continue to be abusive in future. You possibly can have high quality non-standard contracts, okay, across, provided you use technology, you use self-regulation, etc. into it. One of the things which possibly the industry could talk about, you have master carriers, and many times when you have the real master carriers, many of them ring fence them by taking them in their role, or having exclusive contracts with them. But that is only for very few. But why not, like what the Urban Company had done, partner stock options. Okay, we are talking about, engrossing the partners in actually the profit or the future of the firm. Okay, the diamond industry in Surat, some of them have actually done it by what they call as working partners. Okay, they do not share ownership, but they do share a part of the profits of the shop. So rather looking at, and I think Malabar has a similar model, at least in the retail. Okay, you could think about a lot of unconventional ways to look into it, so that the quality of employment in this sector improves, because that is one grave problem. And as the madam had said, is that this is the best time, is because the whole world is actually focusing on ESG. And I believe that in corporate governance, people would say that profit will be taken for granted because that's your responsibility to create profit. But your value to your value will be determined, or worth will be determined by possibly the ESG parameters which you serve. Okay, and that's the way world is actually looking for, and I can actually see that, notwithstanding the ESG washing which is happening, okay, which is the reality, but actually firms really taking ESG extremely seriously. In a couple of boardroom conversations, I think ESG is at the forefront, which shows a change. And then ESG does not mean that only the parent does ESG, but it's the whole supply chain. And possibly some of the way of deconstructing the way, or having a new way of looking at things, would possibly help. And the last one is, till now maybe also the industry also focused on task specific capital building. So I am good in a particular task related to gold jewelry manufacturing. Okay, and then my capital was built on that. From there, I think you possibly will have to look into career-centered capital building. Okay, the career is possibly developed as a holistic person who possibly contributes more than just that fragmented job which the career does, and that also might be but maybe some of those HR initiatives like multi-skilling, okay, job rotations, those things, etc., could be looked into as a way of what you call improving the quality of work and the experience of the career. Okay, so in the interest of time, let me stop here.